Good evening and welcome to another edition of Nevada County Interviews. I'm your host, Paul Minicucci, and I want to welcome you to part 2 of our show about Nevada County reads and writes. And our audience may recall that 2 weeks ago we had readers on our show, young readers, who were recreating The Book Thief, which was the book chosen this year for the Community Reads. And I'm pleased to have 2 guests in the studio and 3 of our student award winners who competed in the essay writing contest. So I want to welcome Joanne Marie, who's the chairperson of the Literacy Committee for the Center for the Arts, and Megan Toro, who is a Nevada Union English teacher. Thanks for having us on, for being here with us. And my students will get to read later, but we have Sophia, Jocelyn, and Natalie. Thank you, ladies, for coming aboard. So, before we talk about The Book Thief and the whole process, I want to get to know a little bit more about my 2 guests here. So, Joanne, tell me where your love and introduction to literature began. When did you first really become an aficionado of literature?
I don't know about aficionado, but I learned to read when I was a child. My family read, and I loved reading from the very beginning.
And how is reading integrated into the Center for the Arts?
Well, part of their mission statement is providing literature events, literary events. So when the Literature Alive decided to merge with the Center for the Arts, it was just a wonderful fit. It fit right into their mission statement.
Mm-hmm. And when did that come about?
Early 2007 is when we actually.
So it's a fairly recent.
Yes,
event.
it is, and we're evolving as we go.
And are you a native of these parts, or did you?
No, I came up here 15 years ago from Southern California.
All right. So the Center for the Arts. And your panel decided to join the Nevada County Reads?
Yeah, our committee was talking one day, and one of the committee members said, gee, what about Nevada County Writes? So rather than create a whole new venue, so to speak, we went to the Nevada County Reads and said, what about Nevada County Reads, Nevada County Writes? And they loved the idea. Mm-hmm. So we merged.
I think one of the great parts of the process I like is it's a real true collaboration between the schools, the library system, the Center for the Arts, and half dozen other businesses that pitch in. So, Megan, you are a teacher at Nevada Union High School. Now, I have to admit to being a one-time English teacher myself at a high school level. So, how did you get interested in teaching English?
Well, it was sort of a circuitous route. I loved English in high school. It was probably my best subject. And since it was my best subject, I had the idea that in college you should do things you had never done before. So I did a few other things, and then finally, after a couple of years, came back to English. I just remember how excited I was when my homework was to read a book.
Right. So. It's hard to believe that you get to do something you love for credit, huh?
Yeah.
So what's the best thing about being an English teacher at high school level, do you think?
The best thing is definitely my students. Mm-hmm. The times in class when they're excited with me, or they're pleased with what we're doing, or, I see that little interchange where they become motivated and they see how much they're capable of. I really enjoy my students.
And what level of English do you teach? Junior, seniors?
This year I'm teaching all sophomores.
All sophomores, mm-hmm. Good. What's the curriculum about sophomore level, principally?
Sophomore level, it's, the regular vocabulary, reading, writing, different styles of writing. The state curriculum is gearing a lot more actually away from literature and definitely from creative writing into more workplace documents and kind of writing you might do in a job.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking a little bit before off camera about the impacts one way or another the technology has had on writing. On the one hand, I think writing is more commonplace now for people like blogs. I'm a blogger. I like to write things from time to time, so it's probably a good thing. On the other hand, people tend to use writing in email and in Twitter and those kinds of mobile kinds of social media in a less formal way, which some critics think is not good for the English language.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I make sure as the year starts out and then continually after just to remind the kids that they're not texting me.
Yeah.
And so when it's something that's turned in the classroom, they need to do all the little things that we've learned about. And I joke about it and just try to help them see that there's nothing wrong with the shorthand kind of writing that they do when they text or they're on Facebook or any of those, but that we have a time and place. There's a place where you wear flip-flops and there's a place where you dress up. And so in a classroom where we're using standard English. I find that students are really happy when we go into the computer lab and are writing things on the computer. And all of us, I think teachers included, have gotten so unused to actually having the pencil in our hands on the paper that it's something uncomfortable for students. But once they get into a writing assignment and have enough time to sort of invest themselves in it, then you can tell they get excited about their ideas.
And how is writing and literature integrated in a classroom? So do you teach criticism, literary criticism in any sense in the classroom?
Well, in the classroom we're trying, different teachers have their different styles. In my classroom we're definitely trying to analyze the literature, being able to recognize the talent of these authors and how they, trying to not learn the literary devices for the sake of learning the literary devices, but so that we have a way to talk about literature. And then we also look at literature because then by having read something, we all have an experience in common. We all know Atticus Finch. You know, you don't know my sister Mindy, but these characters become people we have in common, and therefore we can talk and about this shared experience.
Right.
And so then, as far as writing based on literature, I love to have the students emulate the authors that we read and do, kind of copycat writing.
Right.
And then we do the more analytical essay writing, which, I tell the kids is so they, it's teaching them to think.
Right. And I think in the workplace, that alone is maybe one of the most valuable skills somebody can have, is to be able to analyze and use language to talk about analysis of whatever we're working on. So Joanne, we talked a little bit about the integration now of the Center for the Arts on the writing side. Do you have a role in choosing the books that Nevada County reads and writes?
Well, this was the first year, and it was collaborative right from the beginning. I came on the committee, and we, as a committee, just decided. I did have a voice. I wasn't the voice, but I had a voice.
Now, The Book Thief is an interesting book because when I first was reading it, I wondered whether or not kids would be interested in it in the same way adults would. I didn't see it so much as a young adult book, which has won prizes for it in that category. How did you look at the book? Is it?
I kind of felt the same way. I was surprised. We have teachers on the committee also who said the kids really love this book, and I was kind of surprised by that myself. I felt that I don't have the experience of being in the schools and being around students that much, so I was surprised that was a book that took off and was well received.
Right. It's a fairly complex book.
Yeah, I loved it because of the premise. I mean, Death as the narrator just blew me away. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
Nice.
Certainly was interesting. Well, begin in the book, The Book Thief, the Death does talk about the moment when death comes to different people. They talk about the color that's there. What do you make of the relationship between death and color?
Between death and color, well, I just think it's a way of symbolically looking at life, and death is such a big part of life.
Right. I spent some time trying to figure out why certain people were associated with yellow and burning, and some were dark and some were black, and it was an interesting way of trying to figure out what was going to come next in terms of that. In fact, the students who came on and read, we were talking about maybe adapting this book to a play because it did such a good job. Being a playwright, I don't find any book that I don't think can become a play. They all are plays. So, what is the relationship of this particular book in the curriculum, or is there one?
In the 10th grade year, our curriculum was chosen, and we have a list to choose from, and was chosen to go with the students' world history course. And so I warn a lot of students, this is the literature is sort of like doom and gloom, and Julius Caesar assassination and backstabbing and literal stabbing. And then there's, we go into Night, a memoir from a Holocaust survivor, Lord of the Flies. So a lot from that era, and that's pretty down. So this book ties in well because the students do quite a bit of studying the Holocaust, and we read several other pieces. But my first contact with The Book Thief was when my daughter read it several years ago, and it instantly became her favorite book. And so because of her, I read it, and I was truly moved by it, just engrossed in it. And as she moved into the high school level, she told me, "Mom, you better not ever teach this book in class. That will ruin it."
Right.
And so I really respected her because I knew what she meant, that the book is a really personal experience for people who read it. But it ties in beautifully. I've encouraged many kids when they're doing a book of their own choice, read this. Students love it. You'll love it. It's the different perspective on the Holocaust. And so I encourage kids to read it because it really does fit in with a lot that we're studying.
Right. And there are some parallels to other books. The Diary of Anne Frank, for example. Is that something you do, teach books in concert with each other? Compare one to the other?
Oh, yes. Yes. Matter of fact, I know one teacher who does it specifically because then kids have a harder time lifting essays from online when you have to compare. But yes, I think, we want to teach kids to connect the dots, to take things from here and things from there and put those ideas together. These two books and then that lesson in history class and then this TV program I watched and this discussion I had.
Now, what's interesting about this book is it's told from the perspective of a German family. Even though there's a Jewish character in it, of course, they're hiding in the basement. Did you find that illuminating? Looking at, I thought that was a novel way to talk about these experiences.
I thought that was a great way. I thought the author did a marvelous job on this book, all in so many different ways.
Right.
That being one of them, and death as a narrator. But I think seeing or hearing the perspective of the German people that weren't involved in the political aspect of that was worthwhile.
Yeah, it was very complex. In fact, Hans has a sign for the people who didn't read the book. Go out and read the book, people. But Hans is almost driven to become a member of the Nazi Party so that he can not be suspected of doing something untoward. So it is a kind of interesting way in which the Germans had to deal with it. The other example was with the Rudy. Has to have a relationship with the Hitler Youth that doesn't particularly want to have. And so the way in which you had to sort of go along in order to get along in that society was, I always felt it was really a big dilemma. And it's just kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, which it does,
I think it gives, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just was going to say, I think it gives thought to what would you do under those circumstances. For me, anyway, it made me really think, what would you do? How, if you're in that place, in that space, and those things are going on around you, how would you react to that?
Right. Now, let's talk a little bit about the idea of the book thief. I take it there's a metaphor here about sort of creating your own world and stealing language, if you will. One of the things that happens in the book's young girl goes to the mayor's wife's house and steals books out of the library, which turns out the mayor's wife actually knows all about. Is that a metaphor, do you think, Megan? I mean, how does the stealing of words or using language in that fashion, why is it called the book thief?
I'm going to defer because that's actually been several years since I read it.
Okay. Do you have a sense of that?
Well, my sense of it is that she didn't even read when she first started doing that, when the first book that she took. And it was her way of learning language and learning how to read. And and in terms of the mayor's wife, they were kind of, she was participating in
Right,
that.
they're co-conspirators.
Yeah,
for that,
absolutely. And getting words to her. Words were really important.
Right.
I don't know if I don't know metaphor here.
Yeah.
But I just think that the whole idea of her engaging in language and getting books to read was so important to her. And that's why I think writing is so important.
Right. And in fact, the fact that the book was written in the basement saved her life, as it turns out,
Yes.
because she was out reading the book when the bombs came and everyone else.
That's right.
And I don't really know of another novel. Maybe I was thinking of the other great novel that we used to teach in high school was the Slaughterhouse-Five by Vonnegut, which just about everybody dies in as the firebombing in Dresden. And this was a very heavy book in that almost all the characters you come to know are dead by the end of the novel. So how did you deal with that? Did you find any students who were disturbed about that, do you think?
It's interesting. A lot of the teenagers that I deal with who love to read, they don't want the cotton candy books.
Yeah.
They really like these nitty-gritty, realistic and hardship kind of books. And so, I know a lot of students who, I'm definitely, they cried. The book made them cry, but but it was overall, I think, an uplifting experience.
So, now I'm going to turn this over to our students who've listened to us jabber long enough. And thank you again for coming. Let me, before we do that, how many kids entered the writing part of the contest, do you know?
We had 8 submissions.
8 submissions? Okay, and we had 3 girls here. Do we have any boys?
We had one boy
Yeah.
who wrote a great story. It was really hard to judge.
Do you think, how do you go about recruiting these students? Did you depend upon going through English classes, or was there other ways of doing this?
We put the word out to the schools through their newsletter, which I forget what the newsletter is. Okay.
Yeah,
But
that's why. Yeah.
they were notified that this was a competition that was being held, and mostly through the English classes, yes.
Right. And how about the library? Were they
The library certainly put out the word, and we too at the Center for the Arts got out the word on our website.
Now, I don't know whether there is one or not. Is there a book club for kids at the library? Do you know?
I believe so.
Yeah, for young adults.
Jill Sonnenberg has a book club, doesn't she?
Yeah.
They can answer.
Now, Jill said that they had actually 42 of these books checked out at the same time on a waiting list to read, and I thought that was really remarkable for something that was not a required.
Well, and I know a lot more students who started work to enter the competition and just didn't get all the way. A lot of students were interested.
It was really a tough contest in a way. So can you set that up for us, Joanne? What did you ask the students to do?
What we asked them to do was, one, read the story, have read the story, and use the beginning sentence and the ending sentence as the bookends for their own story, and have an original work.
Mm-hmm. And that, in a 530-page novel, was quite a challenge.
And get that down to 1,000 words.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Sophia, you ended up winning first place. What's the name of your essay?
It's called The Fragments of a Foreign Language.
Okay, and would you read it for us now?
Yeah. The question is, what color will everything be when I come for you? It could be a gray sky, nothing notable. A quiet passing where you slip gracefully from one hell to the next. But this is a rare occurrence. Most likely, the sky will be some color you remember from before you were born. The sky will be your last attempt at a masterpiece. An oxymoron. Dead quiet. There is nothing quiet about death. Most of you humans live your lives silently, head down and feet dragging. You let yourself be buffeted along by the wills of others, hoping to avoid my notice. It's only when you realize that I've come for you anyway that you have one last outburst, one singular plea to change. That day, the sky is a brilliant orange, with a tier of red across it, both the moon and the sun fighting for dominance. Lying below it were two men, one German and one American. They had gunned each other's planes down. This is what the German, Luca, was thinking. No better time to go than with the sun, but there was a bitterness even in his dying thoughts. This is what the American, Sam, was thinking. I can't see the sun. He'd lost his vision on the way down when the glass of his plane was driven into his eyes. Both fixated on the sky now that they'd been forced to Earth. They'd been practically living in it before and had never given it a second thought. They were also acutely aware of each other. They felt no sympathy for one another, but they couldn't help realizing that their numbered gasps had synchronized. Almost more painful for Sam than the fact of his vision loss was the fact that he had to spend his last moments with his German killer. It did not occur to him that he was also a killer. It did not cross his mind that perhaps Luca was guilty of nothing more than ignorance and fear and a conformist mindset. Bad things, to be sure, but he was far from the Hitler that Sam imagined him as. Almost more painful for Luca than the fact that he had, among other things, cracked 3 ribs, was the fact that he had to spend his last moments with his victim. I had gotten there too early. Less than their wounds had, and would, kill many more men, but they were stubbornly clinging to the last shred of life. They were not done yet. The distance between the two men was painful. Because it was too far, or too close, they were not sure. Is it better to die with the enemy, or to die alone? There was a need for words in the air. They hungered for something to remind them they were human. They needed to be assured they weren't just part of a broken machine, nothing more than the metal they were twisted up in. It was Sam that coughed out a first sentence. It is easier to speak to someone you hate than you might think. Unlike Luca, there was no shame there. No fear of what Luca would accuse him of. When you hate someone, they can tell you the truth, and you'll recognize it as nothing more than filthy lies. When you feel indebted to someone, they can tell you filthy lies, and you'll recognize it as nothing more than the truth. I can't see the sun. It wasn't a plea. That's what Sam told himself. But humans are very good at deceiving themselves. Perhaps through some miracle of the universe, perhaps through some piece of luck, Luca knew some English through a grandmother who'd come from America. Sie ist, it is going down. The moon is coming up. Luca knew what Sam was asking for, at least on the surface. The sky is orange mit rot, with red. Red like, wie sagt man das? Red like blood. Sam could not form a clear picture in his mind of it all, though he could see the drop of blood very clearly, running down from the sky to mingle with his blood, to mingle with the German's blood. And the ground? Sam's other senses, besides his vision, were beginning to fade now, his mind starting to deteriorate. He knew what was behind his question. He knew what he was really begging for. Show me we're men. Remind me there's a goodness in this world. Prove to me there's enough for me. The ground is... Luca looked through the smoking metal, past the broken wing. They had crashed in an abandoned field whose sparse decorations consisted of hunks of concrete and dying weeds. It is schön. It is beautiful. Schön, repeated Sam. He died with the fragments of a foreign language on his lips. Luca studied Sam's lips to see how he'd said it, how the word had fallen from his lips. He looked finally into Sam's eyes, saw the reflection of both the moon and the sun in them. But it was too late for more than half of the connection to be made. Luca came to me reluctantly, yanked abruptly from the body he'd lingered in for too long already. As I left, I saw that the sky was turning a peaceful dark blue, but neither Sam or Luca saw it. A last word from your narrator. I am haunted by humans.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Very good. Jocelyn, what was your essay titled?
A pocketed story.
Okay, let's hear it. Thank you.
The question is, what color will everything be at the moment when I, death, come for you? I don't understand humans. Sometimes I see them cry and I don't understand. I still remember one girl. She wasn't an adult or beautiful or striking or talented. She was just a girl, one of billions. She was reading a book, and the book, like her, was no great work, no famous novel. I remember watching as she looked away from the pages when the last word had been read. Somewhere in the simple act of closing the book, she began to cry, crying for reasons I didn't understand. I didn't know. I watched her for longer than I should have. I watched her cry, then stare at the wall, then cry more. She cried and contemplated and sobbed and thought. It was like a rhythm, and I fell into watching it, watching and waiting for it to break, because they all break. Humans, I mean. This process of contemplation carried on longer than it had actually taken her to read the book. And then I wondered why she had bothered if it upset her so drastically. Why waste the time, the energy, all that salt water? Maybe the book had struck her, as books have struck me in the past. Maybe it had revealed something to her, awoken a part of her soul, shown her a truth, something beautiful, exotic, captivating. Maybe it had given her something bright and new, something worth living for, loving for, lying for, dying for. Maybe it had just given her something, just given. But even as I thought all these pleasant, profound things, I knew the opposite was true. Yes, the book had revealed something to her, but it wasn't pleasant. I've seen tears of joy, but never are they shed by a young woman who sits on a bed clutching a book to her chest. She is alone, and people who are alone do not shed tears of joy. It is just a fact. I am not trying to sound cruel. She was crying because the book had shown her death, had shown her me. It had given her a glimpse into something beyond physical grasp. She was, possibly for the first time, experiencing something supernatural. And I don't mean that in the ghostly sense. Boo. No, she was experiencing something beyond explanation. Death, but more accurately, sadness. Not what you feel when a loved one or a close pet dies. Not what you feel when summer camp is over and you must return home. Not what you feel when someone you love leaves. Not what you feel when you're dying, which is an odd thought in of itself. Humans are always dying, but not always sad. This sadness was different. This was the sadness that comes with the deteriorating of one's self, the loss of innocence. I had seen this sadness before, in the eyes of another girl, and her story had struck me as well. But it's not just a memory, it's a book, carefully tucked away in one of many pockets. But that story is for another time. The sobbing girl on the bed ceased with the hysterics, and this seemed to release me from her grip. I left her room silently and made my way deeper into the house. I found her parents' room, where a man was dying. I grabbed him as he slipped into the end. You have a daughter who will take notice. That's what I said to the man when I took him over my shoulder. His eyes were wide and gray, with disease and hurt and death, but in them I also saw pride. As we passed through the hallway, the two of us now, I saw the girl hanging out the window in her bedroom. She had abandoned the book on her nightstand. She was looking at the sky. It was a dark blue, bordering dangerously on black, the color of loss, revelation, freedom, a deadly combination. A last note from your narrator. I am haunted by humans.
Thank you. Equally wonderful. So, Natalie, your essay was entitled?
Oh, I didn't title it.
You didn't title it. Okay.
No.
Would you read it for us? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. The question is, what color will everything be at that moment when I come for you? Perhaps indigo, like the deepest blue of the sea, or purple, the belly of storm clouds, or, more commonly, black or bloody red. When I came for him, the sky was the palest of yellows, like homemade butter. I almost smiled as I imagined a cat lapping it up at one corner. I'd never been to this precise corner of the world before. You might think that's uncommon, but it really isn't. People die everywhere all the time, but they always seem to be in one particular area. I swept over the deck to where he lay. His eyes were open. I could see straight through them into his soul, which I took into my hands, fluttering like a moth. The soul shed memories that absorbed through me into the surrounding universe. Then I turned to the body. The boy man was lying face up on a small boat in the middle of the ocean. I closed his eyes. I remember how well they matched the sky, pale gold. Clenched in his hands there was a scrap of paper with what looked like a name and an address of someone in the United States. I pocketed the slip of paper and left. It hadn't been a very busy year for me. People were at rest, but there was something in the atmosphere that suggested uncertain and violent times ahead. Since I had nowhere to be at the time, I set about finding out more about the boy man. I supposed my first order of business was to find the person on the piece of paper and then work backwards from there. The address took me to a small town in southern Florida. It's an old town with lots of rundown plantation houses. I find the house number and go inside. A middle-aged woman sat in a chair at the kitchen table talking on the telephone in Arabic. I don't know where he is. He should be here by now, but who knows? The ocean is unpredictable, or he could have gotten held up somewhere. I'll call you as soon as I know something, I promise. Yes. Goodbye. She hung up the phone and put her head in her hands. Where are you? She asked softly. I was pulled away then by my duties. An old man surrounded by his family. His soul was waiting for me. And the contrast between the boy's death earlier compared to this man's death is so striking. This man died after a full, long life, surrounded by his family and friends. The boy died young, all alone in a raft. I returned to the boy's body and put the paper back in his hand. It would help the authorities identify him. I could see the shoreline from the raft now. It wouldn't be long until the boy washed ashore. The body would be discovered and the woman would be notified, then through her, the boy's family. Again, I was pulled away to the death of a young woman. A suicide. I've always hated suicides. They trouble me much more than anything else. I took the hand of the woman's soul and gently led her away. I returned to the Florida woman's house to wait with her for news of the boy. When the police finally knocked on her door, I left, because everyone deserves their privacy when they receive terrible news of a loved one. I went and made myself busy looking after the boy's body in the morgue. I wondered what made me so attached to this particular boy. I'd taken care of sailors and young boys before, so what made him so different? I wasn't sure, but I knew that he was worth my attention. I returned to the woman's house and watched her stare at the phone for an hour or so before she picked it up and dialed. Hello? Yes. I'm sorry, but your son is dead. Yes, I'm sure. I just heard from the police. No, I don't think they'll find it. He was clever enough to have hidden it well. Yes, I'm going to go look for it now. Yes, I'll call you when I've found it. Goodbye. She took a deep breath and then stood and walked out to her car. I followed her to the morgue and watched as she searched the boy and took something from a vial around his neck. She brushed the hair away from his face. I'm so sorry, Ahmed, she whispered, and then she left. I followed her home and watched as she plugged the tiny device into her computer. Several documents popped up on the screen, and she opened the first one and read it aloud to herself. To the Honorable President of the United States of America, I write you this letter to inform you of an urgent situation in Morocco. There is a secret organization that is in the possession of nuclear missiles. The leader of this group plans to launch these missiles at several countries on the dates listed below. I have also included other details about the organization in the following documents. Please take immediate action to destroy this group and disassemble their weapons. I pray that you will not receive this letter too late. Sincerely, Ahmed Fallah. So this boy must have stolen this information and then attempted to bring it to the president himself, but he died trying. I admire his bravery. To this day, I still don't know all the details, but the woman delivered the message to the president, who then took immediate action, thus preventing the attack and inevitable war that surely would have followed. The dead boy was recognized for his actions and is talked of worldwide. Once a nameless, insignificant body, he is now a symbol of courage and peace. A last note from your narrator. I am haunted by humans.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Now I'm going to get up and move over and talk a little bit more to the girls. So let's start with you, Sophia. You're a freshman, did you say?
Yeah.
That's really just a wonderful accomplishment to win first place as a freshman. I can't even imagine what that would be like. So, having written this, you would consider yourself a writer, correct? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So when did you first get interested in writing, and how did you do that?
Well, I've always been interested in writing, like as far back as I can remember, but I didn't really start writing that much until 8th grade. And also a lot in 7th grade because that was when I had 2 really good English teachers, so I think that contributed a lot.
Your paper was, I would characterize as being really quite philosophic. Did you intend? Well, the other one's more narrative. You know, you're commenting a lot more on conditions, and you had a couple of nice turns of phrase about truth and lies. I like that a lot. What were you trying to accomplish here? What do you want the reader to come away with?
Well, I started out with the idea, I've always liked other sides of the story, and Luca was kind of the other side of all the Nazis because he was fighting in the war, but I wanted to show that not all the soldiers were doing it completely out of, hatred. And, like, he'd done some very cruel things, but he'd also, helped Sam. He was almost the nicer one of the 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And so I think the point of this story was that people aren't always what you expect them to be.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you first read The Book Thief, how did it strike you that the Death was the narrator?
I thought it was really cool. I love when there's different types of narrators than you might normally expect, because when you tell a story through a unique point of view, then it gives the story this whole other dimension almost.
Did you find, when I was reading the book, I found the narrator to be almost more human than the humans in some sense. Did you find that too?
Yeah, Death seems like, at first he's kind of remote, but then you see that he's seen so much tragedy, and he's almost more capable of loving and compassion than all the humans who are going through all this horrible stuff that's kind of changed them.
Mm-hmm. What did you make of the idea that Death talks a lot about the color?
I thought that was cool because color is a really great way of showing, was mentioned before, a metaphor for people. And I've always liked when colors or sounds are associated with other things that mean something more than just might appear on the surface.
Right. Have you ever heard of the opera composer Wagner?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you know what a leitmotif is?
No.
Okay. Leitmotif is exactly what you just explained, where in Wagner's opera he will have a certain chord gets played by the orchestra right before a person enters. It's sort of their totem, as it were, a musical totem, just in the same way you just talked about it. That was a really wonderful essay. You should be very proud.
Thank you.
So, Jocelyn, what did your story is a very personal story in a sense. It's about this young woman who's losing her father. Tell me what you were trying to achieve here.
Well, I think I had a youth leader, a friend who passed away recently, and he was old and it was his time, but it just really struck me just how fragile life is, and his children. I was thinking about them and what they must be going through, and it just made me think about losing a parent and what that would be like, how that would affect someone.
I'll ask you the same question. How did you feel about Death being the narrator in The Book Thief?
Well, I read some of Zusak's work before I read The Book Thief, and it's just so different. The Book Thief is truly just a one-of-a-kind novel. And when I realized that Death was the narrator, it was just... The thing that struck me about Death was that he notices. He notices everything, the color, about people, and, he notices more than humans notice. He's more aware.
Right. In the novel, Death was, I found very, I would say, objective. I mean, didn't have
Yes.
a subjective feel. So he was dealing with people all in their same, comes to them with the same kind of attitude. What did you make of? What did you make of the first sentence and the last sentence? What do you think they mean?
Well, the first sentence it's cool because it's like him opening up with almost a personal question to you, like look at your life, what matters to you, what color would represent you and your last moment and your whole life, everything about you. And then the last line is kind of the same way. It's like death you think would be so much bigger than humans, but at the same time he's haunted by us. Like the decisions we make and the actions we take affect him, and he's haunted by them. He thinks
Right.
about them.
Yeah, usually you would say humans are haunted by death.
Exactly.
Right? And he turns it around on that. That was a wonderful essay. I really appreciated it. It was very much like a short story, actually.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Natalie. You took, you almost wrote a screenplay here. I found it, sort of a way of looking at a death from a sort of a political perspective. So tell me a little about what you were trying to achieve in your essay.
Well, at first, I really didn't have any idea what I was going to write. And then I just kind of came up with the idea, and I played around with it to make it fit. So it just kind of came out of nowhere, really.
And so what was so the protagonist in your story is, I guess, the mother, and how she feels, or do you think it's the young man? Who's driving this train, as it were?
I guess the boy.
The boy. Okay. What do you think the boy was? How did he come to decide such a heroic act? Do you think?
Because he thought it was wrong.
Yeah, he's pretty young to be taking on the. Well, that's what I found was really interesting about your story. He was a very heroic person for such a young age. How did you feel about when you were reading the book Thief that Death was the narrator?
I forgot that for a while, and then I would realize again, oh, he's Death, and then because he would mention it, but he would just sound so human.
Now, in the book Thief, Death actually lets slip in the first part of the book about some of the manner in which some of the characters are going to die, even before you meet them. Did that throw you off at all? Did you like that device?
I kind of liked it because it prepared you for it when it happened. It made it not so hard.
Right.
So,
Now, what year are you in Nevada Union?
I'm a sophomore.
Sophomore. And Jocelyn, you're
Sophomore.
a sophomore. Great, freshman, sophomore. Do you think each of you you might pursue literature or writing in your futures?
Definitely.
Yeah. What do you want to be 10 years from now? Where are you going to be, Sophia?
I don't know. It'd be great if I could have like a book published, though.
Great. I had that same ambition. I'm still chasing my first book award. How about you, Jocelyn?
Actually, we're doing a sophomore project in Mrs. Torres' class where we, figure out what we want, and I've narrowed it down to world traveler, English teacher, and author.
Great. And so, English literature is going to be a mainstay for you then.
Yes.
How about you, Natalie?
An author.
Yeah. What's so neat about being an author, do you think?
When people listen to you.
How about you, Sophia? Do you think it'd be neat to be an author?
Yeah, well, because that's like kind of like what Natalie said. People listen to you. It's a way to share your views and stuff.
What happens if you write something that people don't get it, do you think?
Well, it can be a personal experience, writing, You can write for yourself.
Right. So it's not too early for you guys to be thinking about college? Yeah? Or you just want to
Thinking.
graduate high school and go out and see the world?
College.
College. Okay, yeah, definitely if you want to become an English teacher. So English teachers are pretty neat for you guys, huh?
Yes.
Yeah? That doesn't happen to every student, I have to tell you. But I am in touch with some of my students who were students in classroom when I was 22. That was like 30 some odd years ago. So, believe me that English teachers do have a big impact on kids. I was very surprised by that. So, well, I appreciate your work. Really, I do. So you guys going to enter this contest again next year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What's your favorite book?
I have so many favorite books. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Tell me a couple.
Just Listen by Sarah Dessen, and then Broken for You, and I forget who wrote that. And then anything by John Green, like he wrote An Abundance of Catherines. So those are some of my favorites.
And you chose those books on your own to read, or were they part of a classroom activity?
I chose those on my own.
Great. How about you, Jocelyn?
The Hunger Games are my favorite books. And then Jane Austen, anything Jane Austen.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you like about Jane Austen?
Well, I like just being transported to a whole nother world. And I just like her writing style, the way it flows. And when I first started reading, it didn't make any sense to me, but I thought it was cool to read, Jane Austen. But
Right.
now that I get it, I really enjoy it.
Right. And it's interesting how Jane Austen can be writing stories about Victorian England, and yet they still resonate with us today.
Exactly.
In fact, they become movies like Clueless. How about you, Natalie? What's your favorite book?
I like Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson, and anything by Alice Hoffman, and The Book Thief.
What's your favorite? I love Alice Hoffman too. I like Illumination Night's my favorite, one of my favorite books. Which one do you like?
Well, I just read The River King by her, and I found out there's a movie, so I want to go watch that now.
Right. Right, and then you guys will start seeing, I think, the connection between novels and and screenplays. So, well, thank you very much. I'm going to walk back over to our other guests. So, Mika, it's pretty exciting, isn't it, to watch these students? Are you surprised by how well and sophisticated the essays are?
Well, no. I mean, pleased, very pleased, and it's wonderful to see the girls and just their the poetry in their words and the meaning, the emotion behind them.
Yeah, they're all. I was pleased and a little surprised at how polished the work was. So, John, what can we do as a community to highlight these kids' work more? Is there something we could be doing to follow up? I know they had a ceremony and reading at the center.
Well, as a community, I would say support the Nevada County Reads, Nevada County Writes. That's what we do every year, and as you can see, what talent we have in the community. Students here today represent students that we should be paying attention to.
Right.
And I think it's wonderful that they've done that, and you can see why it was so hard to judge.
Oh yeah, I don't know how we could even choose
Oh,
among them.
it was tough.
Yeah.
But as a community, I just think supporting them, supporting anybody that provides us with this kind of talent.
And what were you looking for in the judging of these works? Because they ended up not being. Well, Sophia's was sort of an essay, but the others were more stories. What were you expecting that, or did you expect it to be more of an essay about the book?
I expected it to be more original work.
Yeah.
I did, personally. The judges felt that a little offsetting, that they felt that they should be more about the book.
Attached to the book in some way?
Yeah, but I love the originality. I love their stories.
Why did you choose, or who chose, the idea to have the first and last sentence?
We as a committee did that.
Yeah. That's a pretty audacious thing to do. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a lot of guidance.
Yeah.
Did you get nervous about that at all? Or?
No, I thought that was kind of challenging and fun. To sandwich the story in between those beginning and ending sentences, and I thought it would be a challenge for them, and they'd find it exciting to do.
Do you think, I don't know, there are other plans? What comes next with this, or is this sort of the end of this year's competition?
This is the end of this year's, but we begin very early on planning for next year.
Right, and so we're going to choose a new book pretty
Choose
soon. Huh? Start
choose a
going
new
through it.
book, yeah, give them a little more time. We were really pressed for time this year. This was all sandwiched, but it came off very well.
Now, some communities, when they do a community read, I know I participated in Sacramento. They did a community read where they read the whole book out loud, from cover to cover in public. Is that a possibility here, do you think?
I don't know that we would do that. That would take an awful lot of time.
Yeah, it does. But we had various people come in, the mayor came in and started out, and the teachers, I ended up reading at 2 a.m. Near
No,
the
that's
end
a
of
thought.
Yeah. The other thing that I've seen some communities do is they actually get the essays from kids, and they have, the professional theater community comes in and sort of narrates them.
Right.
Is that a possibility? You think we
I
could
think
see
it's
that?
a definite possibility.
Now,
It's fun to listen to the kid. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's really interesting to have them read. You get a different feel when it's read out loud than you do just reading it yourself.
Right.
And we've talked about that probably next year. What we'll do is not have the students, because we can't know who the student is
Right.
when we're judging, but reading all the stories out loud.
Now, did they have they read their stories on radio at all? Did KBMN?
No?
Okay, well, I'm going to call Dave Levine up and say, hey,
There you go.
yeah, we should do a story on that. I know it was a story in the Union
Yes.
that.
Very good coverage. That was really
Right.
nice.
So you three are going to do this again? Yeah. What was the most surprising element to you in this that was different than you thought it might be as you started writing?
I think time management for me. I sent my email in at 11:58, and it was due at midnight.
Oh, wow.
And but almost rushing sometimes is good for you.
Yeah, having time
Under
limits for
pressure.
sure. Yeah. How about you, Natalie? Did you find anything surprising, or you learned anything that you didn't know about?
Well, I sent mine in on the last day too, but it was funny because the power was out everywhere, so we had to drive around and look for somewhere to send it from. So we ended up going to a Starbucks and sending it from there, and it was.
Computer, don't fail me now.
Yeah.
Usually my computer freezes when I have to do. So, Sophie, how many drafts did you do? Would you say?
I started out with one draft that I kind of almost completely changed. There wasn't really that much that was the same, except for the element of the sun and the sky. And then after that, I did one draft that was basically finished, and then just a third one that was just polishing it up.
Did the three of you have trouble getting your essay to be in 1,000 words, or was it the other way around? You found it too short and you had to lengthen it?
Mine is 999 words.
So you were playing with the word count, right?
Yeah, I was so pleased.
How about you, Jocelyn? Did you have a hard time with that or not?
No, I just kind of wrote, and then when I was done, I had like 650 words, and I figured that was good enough.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I had like 875 or something, so that worked out well for me.
And so what other kind of writing do you guys do on your own? I mean, do you keep a journal,
Yeah,
diary, anything like that? Yeah?
poetry,
Yeah, poetry?
short stories.
Is there a literary magazine at Nevada Union High School that you can publish stuff as students?
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that quite an honor to do?
It's through the library club. I know there's another one, but I don't know who does that one. So
Great. Well, it was a pleasure. It really was to have you guys on the show today and your reading. We have about 2 minutes left. What, if anything, will be changed about Nevada County Reads and Writes next year, do you think?
Oh, just as I said, I hope we can expand it to include other segments and get more participation from everybody in the community.
Megan, do you think, I don't know, are students a part of the, do you know, of the selection committee, or should they be, to select a book?
Oh, I bet a lot of students would love to contribute suggestions.
Oh, we might start with these
Yeah,
3 young ladies. They seem to know.
yeah.
Is there anything more that this process, will it become connected more to the curriculum in Nevada Union, you think, in the future?
You know, I think the difficulty is the English department, we get so many things thrown at us.
Right.
And so it takes a lot to be heard.
Right.
When you're one of many, many messages. So, but having been part of the process this year, I definitely would like to support it in the department, that we maybe find out about it sooner or pay attention to it sooner.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to make it an assignment. I think
Right.
it needs to be these students who it's their initiative. But
Right. Well, thank you so much, John, Megan. I really appreciate your coming
you.
here and talking about it. Those of you out there in Viewerland, if you haven't read The Book Thief, please go get a copy. It's a wonderful book. It's not just a youth book. It's a book for adults, too. It's something you can share with your family and talk about. There's just so many themes in there. I want to thank the crew, Jetta and Sam and Janice here out on the floor, and Gail, and the only pug producer in the world, Harley, who sits back there and directs us all, and our crew back on the booth, Diane and Karen and Marilyn. I think I got everybody. I'm Paul Minicucci, and for NC Interviews, we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Rosemary Matrailer, an experienced business and contract attorney, supporting the integrity of your business relationships.
A well-crafted contract is the foundation of every successful business relationship.